artists,
Hi.
and welcome to today's panel discussion on storyboarding for comedy. We invited 4 storyboard artists who work at the intersection of visual comedy and visual storytelling to discuss the responsibilities that storyboard artists face, what brought them into the craft, and how to make the audience laugh through drawings. So, Nick, Pearl, Tom V, welcome to the stream.
Hello.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
I'm doing really great. So why don't we just start with introductions? Nick, can you tell us briefly what led you to become a storyboard artist and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Nick Paris, as you know. I started, I started back in 2008. I was actually the animator first. So I started in the small studios doing animation and doing actually everything. So I've done everything in pre-production. And at some point, I basically reached the point where I found out storyboarders are the storytellers. So instead of me just animating someone else's storyboards, I decided to switch over and become a storyboard artist. And my first big gig was on Teen Titans Go. Then Trolls of Beat goes on at DreamWorks TV. And where am I now? Where am I now? I did the Casa Grandes at Nickelodeon, and now I'm on a show that was just announced called Zuki Sparkle Bee for Nickelodeon, but it's through Canada. So I'm working for Canada, but it's still for Nickelodeon. But that's
Canada, boo.
We don't know anyone from there.
Stares in Canadian.
So V, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to becoming a storyboard artist?
Yeah, I go by V. I have been working in animation for a little bit over 10 years now. I started in France. I worked in the French animation industry for something around 5 years, mostly on 6 to 11 shows. And then I moved over to the US to work on The Loud House. And after that, I started working on shows like Craig of the Creek, Thundercats Roar, Spider-Verse 2, and I think Captain Fall has been announced by Netflix. Yes, it has been announced.
Has now.
Whoa, everybody, cat's out of the bag. And now I am working on the adaptation of Wings of Fire with Warner Brothers. That's been announced too. That's it. That's it for me.
And Pearl, can you tell us about your origin story?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Pearl Lowe, and I'm based in Vancouver, BC, currently in Canada. I started off in animation in 2015 as a storyboard revisionist. I've always been in the storyboard department, and I've primarily worked on 3D shows from 6 to 9 ages. And I don't think until 2018 is when I started working on short films. I worked on Frank Abney's Canvas, which is now on Netflix, and I worked on Hair Love, directed by Matthew Cherry. And after that, I kind of started to venture out into the LA animation scene as well. And currently, I am working on Craig of the Creek at Cartoon Network doing storyboards.
And Tom, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Sure. I'm the old school veteran. Started on movies like Beauty and the Beast and Lion King at Disney. And recently, now I'm working with Illumination on some Minion productions. And before that, I was on a movie called Ron's Gone Wrong for Locksmith Animation. And then Ivandoe was a cool TV series I was on, very funny. I believe it's for Cartoon Network. But yeah, I'm honored to be on this panel with these funny comics. So I can't wait to get into it.
I thought you were about to say these Yunyins, and I was like,
So when we talk about what a storyboard artist does, Tom, can you give us an overview of what a storyboard artist typically is responsible for in a production, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Sure. Yeah, I love this because, usually for storyboarding for me, a typical day is the heavy lifting's kind of done, which is the script. If it's a solid script and you get your pages and you've had a nice kickoff meeting with the team, it's kind of up to you. That's why I love this business. It's like, okay, I get to take the written word and adapt it to visuals. I'm on the front line of these images. So it's exciting to me. But responsibility wise, it's like, I think what I like to do now that I'm kind of been through, a couple rodeos, is I'll take the couple pages I have and just kind of commit to doing what the writer intended. For many years, I would force, I'm going to try to show off and be super funny and make this gag even better before you kind of give the pages their day in court. So that's what I found is a really efficient process now is I'll just do the best job I possibly can at the pages that were given to me. And surprisingly, a lot of times, not surprisingly all the time, but it's like, wow, I didn't really think that gag was going to work, but I really put my all into it and it does work. So it's funny. It's like kind of a nice little reward you get. Responsibility. Yeah, I find in remote work, especially where you can't just pop into the director's office and say, hey, what did you mean by this emotion? It takes too much to, schedule a meeting, break that director out of another meeting to ask him these questions or her. So I think the responsibility means you got to just kind of pick what you think is going to be best for the page and do it and commit to it and then wait till you pitch it and then get notes. So that's kind of a typical day for me.
All right, and I'll kick the question over to Pearl. Pearl, in your opinion, what is a storyboard artist typically responsible for in a production? Oh,
You're
I
muted,
was
Mike.
muted. Let me try that again. So I'm going to kick the question over to Pearl. Pearl, what is a storyboard artist typically responsible for in a production, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, I think because I've navigated to animation industry so far, I've kind of had two main experiences, either with a script-driven show or a board-driven show. So my duties on a script-driven show are different from a board-driven show. And for a script-driven storyboard, I would have to, in Vancouver anyway, I would get a script and I would read through it with my supervisors and director. We would take notes about, what to cut or what to keep or what to plus up, improve on. And I would then go away and basically board pretty tightly to how the script had written out what was going to happen in what scene. There's also a chance that sometimes I would get a radio play and I would use that by listening to the radio play of the voice actors portraying whatever characters they're playing and kind of storyboard and pose out according to the audio that I would get. So that was one way of storyboarding for me earlier on in my career. And then afterwards, you would pitch it to your supervisor, storyboard supervisor and director, get feedback, get notes, and either do the revisions yourself or pass it off to storyboard revisionists. And as for a board-driven show, right now, Craig of the Creek is a board-driven show I'm on. And the duties are a little different where I have a meeting and the writers are included and the storyboard supervisor and the directors and the board artists. We all get together, read over the outline of a script, but the outline is very loose in a way and open to interpretation. And the board artists actually are responsible for writing out dialogue, and we can switch up certain scenes and sequences as we see fit to either fit the story a little bit better or again, plus up a gag or plus up a certain kind of emotional connection that we think ties the story a little bit tighter together. And then we pitch it again to the writers and the storyboard artists and the directors and the supervisors. And after getting feedback from everybody and we get our revisions, we do them ourselves and keep moving forward accordingly to the schedule until we're at a product with the final board.
All right. V, in your view, what is a storyboard artist typically responsible for in a production, and what does a typical day look like for you?
I think ideally, when you start working on a production, you do want to clarify the duties with your production because it can vary so widely between a production to another. So it can be as simple as taking a script and translating it into images that you're going to break down in terms of this angle, this pose, how much posing does the production expect to see? does the production expect to time to dialogue, or is it okay to just copy and paste from the script the dialogue and the action notes? Depending on the production, you could also it could also be okay to start with post-it notes and start pitching with post-it notes, or you would have to do your roughs and pitch in Toon Boom or Flix if you're using Flix, or even the Blender. Blender is a software that's been used for boarding now. For day-to-day, once again, it kind of like is different at what stage of the process I am. Usually I do a first read of the script and try to break it down in the major story beats, kind of like this is the core idea of this sequence, this is the core idea of this next sequence, etc. And then I will break it down in like, these are all the beats that are happening in this sequence, and then I will start to kind of rough them out. And if it's earlier in the process, sometimes I don't even sit in front of the computer. It's just all on paper, just me really thinking and translating the words into pictures. I do consider storyboarding to be very similar to a translator's job. Or if it's a little bit further along in the pipeline, I could be just kind of taking these very first thumbnails and putting them in the computer, like drawing them on my Cintiq for the very first time. Or if we've had this approved by the director, supervisor, showrunner, etc., I could just be doing cleanup, which is my favorite part sometimes, because I can just watch a show and make the drawings really pretty and plus the action and do all the fun little details. So depending at like what week you catch me in, the day will look a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Nick, in your view, what is a storyboard artist typically responsible for in a production, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone's kind of said it already. I'm like, but yeah, I think for me, schedule-wise, we get 6 weeks to do. The shows I've been on, we get 6 weeks to do the 11s. Except for at DreamWorks TV, it was like 5. But lately it's been 6. But how it basically works, yeah, we meet. There's always like a storyboard kickoff meeting. We get the script. We talk. We were like, well, we started this on this one. We read through it. Actually, like usually we just like go page by page if the directors have a note. Specifically, if they want, like a certain shot to look a certain way, or if they want a gag to play out a certain way, they'll let me know while we're reading the script at that point. And then I'll, get the script. I get like usually 3 weeks to rough it, and then 2.5. It's weird. It's like 3.5 to rough it, and then 2.5 to clean it. Somehow I always lose time in the cleaning part, which is, I'm finding out is fine though lately, because like, so I'm one of those people, like, I guess I'd be too clean, and people keep telling me that, and I'm still trying to learn to not be as clean. As long as it's clear, because clarity is the most important part. So I mean, that's definitely what they expect from you, production wise, is for like your panels and your shots to be, clear, so that when it goes down the pipeline, designers, animators, and all that stuff know what's going on. So that's why I always tell people, it's like, if you ever run out of time, at least put the grid down, because background artists love that. That way they know what perspective they need to do the backgrounds and stuff like that. When we give them like a blank panel with just characters, they're like, I don't know what you want from me. So that's kind of like one tip I always give people. But yeah, so yeah, I get that. And like, for the most part, I only really ask questions. It's kind of like Tom, what you were saying, especially with the remote now. It's like such like a hassle to try to hit up the director and like ask. So for the most part, we try to get everything in the kickoff. And then what's kind of cool about the gig is like, and I kind of had to work my way up to this because I used to be really timid. Like I would second guess every shot I was roughing. I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know if this is gonna work. But now I'm kind of like, okay, I get the show. I know they, like want that balance of like cinematic yet don't break the budget. So like it's kind of like I'll be smart and like reusing some shots that I've done before. So I'm kind of it feels nice to like kind of have that confidence, and now that I could just like, they'll kick me off and they just trust me to just see me again on the rough pitch, and then we get notes and we clean it after that. So that's been kind of nice. And then and then after I do the cleaning cycle, then we pitch it to the execs, which I think is one of my favorite parts. of like actually storyboarding. So, and I know a lot of people, I'll say that part and they get really nervous. They're like, wait, you got to pitch in front of people? And I'm like, yes. Like, it's kind of the whole, I actually like, and I tell people this because some people freak out about it because they're really shy. When you start pitching, you kind of tunnel into what you're doing and like your boards and trying to do voices if you want. So you don't even like realize people are around you until you're done and people are clapping. It's like, oh yeah, you did good.
Or there's silence, like on my picture.
Well, like, so the weirdest thing was like when we first went remote when I was on the Casa Grandes, they would mute and like turn off all the video.
Oh, that's horrible.
Because
Oh,
so like
man.
I'm literally like pitching, I'm like da silence, and I'm like, I hope that landed.
I know.
Like,
then you're looking for like head movement or like you're looking for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, instead I'm just staring at myself on the screen pitching, and I'm like, you're doing good. And then like, what would make it funnier too is like sometimes they would speak Spanish, and I'm terrible at Spanish now, because I didn't keep up with it. So I'm all like, blah, blah, blah. Just like I'm waiting for someone to correct me, but they're not going to until like I'm done pitching, and they're like, oh yeah, you said that wrong. I'm like, thanks, but yeah, I tend to be a better pitcher when I feed on the energy of people laughing and, getting those reactions. But that's pretty much besides what everyone else said, those are the big responsibilities of storyboarders is visualizing the script. And you're kind of the blueprint for everything of how the show's going to be like laid out and characters are going to be where in the environments and how the animation will go.
So, Nick, we'll start with you for this next question. In your view, what are the elements of a comedy show, and how might the process and priorities of storyboarding for comedy look different from storyboarding for other genres like action or drama?
I know me personally, I've been on all the slapstick shows. So for me, it's all about like, how can we push this gag and physical humor? What kind of funny faces could sell this joke? So for me, comedy is usually taking something in the script at certain points, because like if it's written out well already and the joke lands in script form and we read and we're already laughing, I don't have to do much but actually bring it to life with the drawings. So for me, it's just kind of taking the average, I'm going to the grocery store, and what jokes can I add between them, getting from produce to the cash register. And so that's kind of the big thing of what's comedy to me. I've yet to venture to like, dark humor and all that stuff. So I don't have much to speak on that part. I'm more of always like, this is the guy who has a lot of energy and makes stuff funny with faces and poses.
Pearl, when someone describes a show as a comedy show that you're boarding on, what do you expect?
I expect them to tell me what kind, because there's so many different variations of comedy. So I think that's really key information. Like Nick was saying, like, is it a slapstick kind of comedy? Is it a darker comedy? For Craig of the Creek, I feel like it's a very much like slice of life kind of adventure comedy. And I think one of the ways to continue to like put in gags in that type of show is to see what ordinary things are happening and make a funny moment out of that. And so it's always kind of like finding those key moments and turning that into a joke. I also think that an important element of comedy in general, for my show, but generally speaking, I've seen that like sitcom staging is very important for comedy, to keep things a little flatter. The extreme upshots or extreme downshots, or the camera moving in and out is a little bit more cinematic, and it can be funny as well. But I think there's something that is just so funny about like cutting to like a flat wide and everyone's just kind of like and like waiting for like the joke to land, or like you have a funny face and you cut up really close to them but it's really flat. And so I think that kind of staging is what like draws out jokes. I think those are the things that I think about.
Yeah, no, those are great answers. Tom, when someone describes a production you're working on as comedy, what do you expect?
I guess I'd expect that if I'm going to be working on the series or on the comedy, I need to know how to jump into like season 3, episode 2. It's if you get on a series, dear listener, it's good to like be very familiar with the universe, but then where they're at in the season. If you get in and your first week of working on the comedy and you're doing all these kind of physical gags, but it's kind of a character that is from earlier in the storyline. He really has matured since that time. You just got to be really aware of where the writers are going, and you don't want to rehash maybe old stuff. And it's easy to do because you think you know the character so well. He would do this, which is okay, but maybe do that with a new original spin on it, something new. We're always looking for new stuff. But yeah, I would say be familiar with the show to that level. Be really familiar. You should be able to say some of your own lines, like what the character would say. Just know the material that well if you're trying to get on a production. Yeah.
And V, since you have experience in a lot of different shows, how might the process and priorities of storyboarding for comedy look different from storyboarding for action or drama?
I feel like, comedy definitely trying, kind of what we were saying before, like all the previous panels said before, trying to make sure to narrow down on the style of comedy if you don't have any materials to refer to beforehand. So is it more like an absurdist type of comedy like Monty Python? Is it more slapsticky? Are we talking Charlie Chaplin? Or is it more like goofy and silly, kind of like, I'm trying to think of like a really goofy movie like Naked Gun? Or is it more like cringe comedy like Eastbound and Down, because that's like a completely different realm? Or are we talking kind of like intellectual-ish, kind of like what
Wes Anderson?
Yeah, exactly. Those are all like offbeats, kind of like very, very different, or like Napoleon Dynamite. Those are all play kind of differently, but at the heart of it, you always kind of want to do this. You want to milk the tension before you hit the release of the gag, because comedy is very much about keeping the audience on a little bit on the edge of their seat, and then just kind of like surprising them. Like absurdist comedy is great with that, because it's like people are like, it's so random, but that's what we love. It's being surprised with something we didn't expect. So kind of like trying to figure out what is that brand of comedy. Asking a lot of questions is always great, because you want to understand your director or whoever you're working with. And then I would say, kind of to piggyback off what Pearl was saying, I do agree. Usually flat works really well if it's if you're a little wider, because there's a little bit of stand-up comics say something like comedy is like just like pain and distance. So you want to understand the pain, but you don't want to be too close to it. Whereas with the drama, you want to be really close to the pain. You feel it. You want I'm so sad and I'm so angry, and like you want to really channel that emotion. But when you're in comedy, you're like, true, I was really mad about this thing that happened to me when I shouldn't have been. And you're kind of relating, you're able to laugh at your own pain. So I think that's kind of what I try to think about when I board comedy. And that's also why I feel more comfortable with comedy, because I don't want to be vulnerable. When you're doing drama, you're very vulnerable. You're like, this is how I feel when I'm sad. This is when I'm angry. But with comedy, it's like, haha, you see how silly I am when I'm crying. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. So
I've never done a scene where
I think is.
Well, I was gonna say, because I've never done a sequence where like they have to really cry and be emotional. I'm kind of the same.
I love it. One of the favorite thing I ever boarded is on Thundercats Roar, and it's the bad guy is crying he's crying buckets, and it's just like, and the Thundercats looking at him, and they start to feel really bad for him. They're like, oh, we kind of went too far with this poor guy. He's just like crying so much, but you're kind of laughing at him because he's a bad guy. You've seen him do bad thing, so it's like it's okay to laugh at him crying. There's a lot of layers. I think that's why comedy is so interesting and very like it's like a very complex formula, because you're dealing with a lot of layers, whereas I feel like drama, it's kind of what you see is what you get. It's very first degree, like, yes, you're supposed to cry. character's crying, you're crying.
So I just want to jump in because I thought it's interesting that you mentioned that like comedy is sort of pain and distance. Do you feel that's a reason why maybe flat staging, a lot of productions tend to lean towards that?
Yes, 100%. If you watch Buster Keaton, you're not going to watch him really close, seeing the facade of the house falling on him, because you're going to get scared for him. But if you're watching from afar, all of the viral videos of people hurting themselves always shot from a wide, like someone doing like a little like bike trick and they fall in their crotch. It's always filmed in a wide.
They never do that crotch shot.
Never do a close up on the crotch. Nope.
Up shot on the crotch. We got it.
Well, you start in the wide.
So we've established that like comedy isn't just one genre, and I feel a little bit bad because a lot of my questions coming up are all going to be about comedy broadly. Pearl, what is the most challenging aspect in your point of view of comedy storyboarding?
I think it's the setup for me. I think sometimes when I board, I'm on the Craig of the Creek crew, and people are funny on that show, and I always feel self-conscious of like, oh my god, are my jokes gonna land? What's gonna happen? And I think one of the things that I've been learning is that setup is really important so the joke lands. Because yes, I think absurd jokes coming out of nowhere is funny, but sometimes it's too like, oh, that feels really random and it doesn't hit as hard as it can. But if it's a setup beforehand, like two characters like discussing like, I don't think I should do this thing, and then being like, yeah, let's not do this thing, and then the joke is like, I'm gonna do this thing, like, I don't know, if there's like some kind of setup, then the joke lands a little harder. So I think for me that's the hardest part of comedy so far. I think also if I'm not strictly working on a comedic show, I think trying to find comedic moments in that is also hard, because I feel like comedy is like a nice spice to like add to round out your series that you're working on or the show that you're working on. Even if it's not strictly a comedy, I do like to kind of add that in to kind of lighten the mood, or kind of give character to a certain character in the show. So yeah, trying to find those moments where it's like not too weirdly out of context, and make sure you set it up that's appropriate for their universe and their train of thought, and then land the joke if possible.
Yeah, to your point, like if you're watching a horror movie, right, very rarely it's like all scary all the time. They tend to cut it with moments that are lighthearted and funny, so that some of the scary moments hit a little bit harder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, in your point of view, what is the most challenging aspect of storyboarding for comedy?
For me, because even when I'm boarding right now, I'm trying to make sure I don't repeat the same joke over and over too much. And if I do, at least change the shot angle. But I think sometimes, yeah, it's like feeling like, wait, I did this joke already in my last episode. I guess I'll do it again. I don't know. It's interesting because it's like, it's kind of like, you kind of have like, because even with any kind of storyboarding, there's like a formula. And so that, like how we were talking about, you want those pacing, everything's in waves. So you do want your up and down time, but it's the same with comedy too. It's like, you want to there's like a formula to doing comedy. So it's like, the setup, the punchline, all that stuff. And so I think for me, the big challenge is just making sure it's funny, but I don't, like I said, feel like I'm repeating the same exact joke throughout the episode. But I guess I'm not. It's weird because I feel like I've done this before, which is like a weird thing to think about. But then like it's different because the story, I guess it's kind of like how people say comedy is all about context. So even though it's kind of technically the same joke, because of the context before the joke, it's different. So I think that's usually the challenge, is just making sure it's not the same.
And what do you feel the most challenging aspects of comedy storyboarding are?
Comedy is, I think it's just like keeping yourself, keep surprising yourself. So kind of paraphrasing a little bit what Nick was saying. Just because if if you're boarding something, if you're playing it out in the way that you've seen before, or that you've done yourself before, it's probable that other people have seen it before and they might see the joke coming, so it might not be as surprising or funny. So I think, yeah, that would be kind of what I would say the hardest part is. Hardest part is also picking something that you thought was hilarious, and but everyone's just kind of
yeah, that's real
silence. And then you're like, and then like you pitch something where you were like, I'm trying to be real here, and everybody laughs, and you're like, no, this was supposed to be funny. Yeah, but that's kind of like stand-up comedy, I guess. It's like stand-ups, like comedians must feel that a lot.
And Tom, what do you feel is challenging about this work?
Yeah, I think that the challenge for comedy, for me, I think I've seen is like when it's funny because animation takes so long. Animation just takes so long to get in the can. And the trouble with that is you get to pick at it and pick at it and pick at it. So if you if you have a great idea for a gag and you go in the room and you pitch the sequence, and it gets the laughs right where you want them, 5, 6, 7 in a little scene. And then, but you got to remember that day, it's like, it worked really well in the room. Look at this room. And then you'll have to revise that scene for whatever reason, and you'll pitch it again. And that time, same exact joke doesn't get quite the reaction, but it's just as good. You didn't change anything. And then you'll pitch it again like a week later. And then the producers are like, yeah, that joke's not landing as well. Maybe we should put a hat on the bear, or let's add some flip-flops to the bear. And it's like, no, you got to just trust that it's working. It worked the first time. So it's a bit of like putting a hat on a hat, until you eventually maybe will come back to that very original first gag. So that's constant challenge has been always since day one, is like keeping the gags alive,
So I really want to drill into that a little bit more. Tom, how do you know if something you draw will come across as funny to an audience?
Yeah, the drawing part, it's got to, if you have a good writer, obviously it starts there with the gag. It's got to be a good setup. Like Pearl was saying, it's all in the setup, in the callback. But how do you know if you don't know? Like Nick had a good thing. If you find it funny, like if I'm drawing and I'm spontaneously laughing, I know that's going to work. I feel good about it. But how do you know if your stuff is going to be funny? You don't know. You just, sometimes you get laughs where you never intended to get a laugh. But I will run it by people if I can. I really can't much here, but that's why I love an audience. I love getting, I'll do a screen record of a bit and just post it on Core and send the text to the director, like, just please look at it, give me some feedback. I've got it. I live for that feedback. In comedy, I think you have to rely on your audience. So.
And Pearl, how do you know something you draw will come across as funny to an audience?
I think I'm very much in the same camp as Tom. You don't really know. You try your best and see how it lands. And I think, when we were talking earlier and Nick mentioned, everyone's on Zoom or on video chat, or not really on video chat, but just voice chat. You can't really tell the reactions of the audience you're telling the jokes to. So that can be a little bit hard. I think what helps is also the delivery of the joke in the sense of timing. Because I think your drawings are one thing, but if you speed through your pitch and you're flipping drawings and people they can't read it, and you're like, oh, wait, let me go back and let me deliver it again. Then it's kind of like not ruined, but it's just not as impactful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also something that what makes comedy so hard, is because it's not just the drawings, it's not just the setup, it's not just the writing, it's also the delivery. So I think in thinking about all those things, It's a combination. Yeah. So I think that is kind of like if timing is right, I think, and your drawings, if you have a little chuckle while drawing it and you pitch it on time, you're like, okay, I think this could land. You don't know, it might not land, but we try and we go back to the drawing board literally and then try again.
Nick, how do you know something you draw will come across as funny?
Yeah, it was kind of like what they're saying, like kind of gut feeling. If the script's written well too, like a lot of it, like I'll read it before I even draw and I'm laughing. So then it's just up to me to like bring that to life through the drawings themselves. But yeah, like if I'm coming up something and pushing up something and I start chuckling, it's for the most part my record's been pretty good where people usually chuckle at that joke. I think the biggest one I remember still to this day, because I got this, like I got one of the people who doesn't usually laugh this loud, but like I was kind of like up really late because of a deadline for my board, and I was like, it'd be funny if the character, because he was going around being a detective, and he was just like, he was such a detective, he was ruining surprises for everyone. So he goes to like this like birthday scenario, and he's like, that's a brush, that's a bow, blah blah blah, and then he's like, this case is solved, and like the last gift looks like him, so he actually rips it open and it is him. And I remember thinking of that literally because it was like 1 a.m. I'm just like, it'd be funny if he was the gift, and like pitched that joke, and like the line producer who like literally laughed out loud in the meeting because they're just so ridiculous. But it's just like kind of like, just I think the more you do comedy, the more you're just kind of like, yeah, that would be funny, and just kind of spitballing ideas and then just drawing it will just kind of lead to funny. It's, you kind of just have to like relax though. I feel like sometimes because I'll tell people are first starting, they'll get like really tense. Same with like what Pearl's saying, it's about delivery, because like if you're nervous and you blow through your boards, nothing lands because you're just like and it's like it's like you gotta like take a breath, kind of like make sure the delivery's good.
That takes a lot of trust in yourself to do, like just to like let that pause hang for an extra 2 seconds before you punch the line. It's hard to do.
Yeah, and make sure your fingers aren't twitching. I had that weapon once. Yeah, because I've done that once. I was so nervous, I kept hitting next, and I was like, "No, stop finger." Yeah,
go back to 0. You're like, "Oh, wait a minute."
I know, like, oh god. I think that only happened like once. I think it's because like I was like first starting.
Oh my god, I've got a crazy story. I was on a film called it was at Disney called My Peoples. Never got made. We spent years developing it, but I remember this is a lesson in like drawing. Like Mike says, how do you know if your drawings will be funny? I would say you don't really want your drawings to stand out at all. You want the character to be reading, and the silhouette and the mood and the timing. But if your drawing is standing out, sometimes that's a red flag. Like I had this character, and it was a scene that wasn't supposed to be funny. It was the main character, Elgin, and he was just going up on a porch. He was going to meet this girl that he liked, and he's knocking on the door, and he's got like a thing of roses or flowers. And I was so excited, and I blew through the pitch, and my drawings were not good, but I knew the story was there. The moment was there, so I wanted to get it in front of everyone. So I get in the pitch room, and I pitch it, and it's a moment, like a serious moment. He's handing her and I heard these girls laughing, and from behind me, I'm like, what? And then after the pitch, I'm like, why were they laughing at that spot? And it was because I like just quickly drew some bad lines near his crotch area, and you got to be careful in the crotch area of the guy, and so it looked like he was packing a gun, if you know what I mean. So yeah, you got to. It's like you don't want your drawings to stand out sometimes. You know, so be careful.
Yeah, but sometimes you do, because when I was on Thundercats Roar, like I took a risk. It's something that we hadn't done yet on the show. But there was this very, when you get on the script, sometimes like they have to do a lot of throat clearing, like a lot of exposition, laying the pipe. And usually as a board artist, you're like, oh gosh, if I just do this 1-to-1, this is going to be so boring. So it's like, how do I spice it up and make it really interesting to look at? And I was like, what if I make this so dramatic and crazy that it becomes funny, because it was just like, yeah, we have to do this and go there, because if we don't do this terrible thing is going to happen. So I ended up drawing the characters hyper realistic, which is not the style of the show at all. And we hadn't done it yet, but I was like, maybe, hopefully, I'll pitch it with the music and give them the, you know how like in superhero movies, sometimes they're so dramatic that you're like, I don't buy this. You know, this is a spoof. So I was just like, let's just go the spoof way all the way. And pitched it, and they loved it. And we have some moments with a hyper realistic Thundercat. And that's the joke. Yeah, the joke is the drawing here. Kind of like if you look at Gumball or like SpongeBob, when they have these like punch in, they're like super realistic, or
Ren and Stimpy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or like the faces are so crazy and a little gross, and you're like,
yeah,
that surprise, or like, oh, yeah, sometimes, and you can't do this all the time though. This is these, you know, like when you're cooking a meal and you want to put just a little bit of chili flakes.
No, it's good.
You know?
I love that instinct she's talking about, because sometimes it's quite, you know, for like newbie storyboard artists or whatever, you don't want to do that. It's like, I don't want to screw up the script. I don't want to screw it up with this joke I have. But I would say listen to your muse, and if you're feeling that good about it, just go for it. But you got to commit. Don't do a halfway job. Like, I'm thinking maybe a realistic drawing. Just commit. Bring the music in, the strings, and go for it.
Yeah, I tell that when people are testing, because the biggest way I've landed gigs from doing storyboard tests is actually pushing stuff that wasn't in the script.
Yeah.
They say because the reason is if you just follow the script, everyone does that. But if you do something that's not outside the script and is your voice, they really see who you are, and you'll be able to problem solve for, like, if the script isn't working and you just need to make it work, you'll be able to problem solve it on your own. So yeah, that instinct is pretty important. Just got to follow it.
So we're talking a little bit about like intuiting, like, is this funny? Is this not funny? V, I wanted to ask you, if you have something that initially like didn't land as well, what can you do to make a scene funnier?
I think usually if something's not funny is that it's either too complicated, or it's not relatable, or they're like you didn't really set it up why it should be funny. I think it's kind of fortunately I've been working mostly on script-driven shows, so I haven't had too much of writing my own joke from scratch. Sometimes it's just not the right moment. Like in the script, comedy can be really hard because it does take a lot of intuition, but it's also kind of I'm like thinking about all the different ways I could go here.
Totally subjective, you know? Don't you think it's so subjective? Like, so you'll get people laughing like crazy at some Anchorman movies, and the other people are like, I don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really subjective.
Yes. Yeah. That's usually why I love slapstick, because slapstick is pretty universal. Everybody kind of gets it. If someone is like in the pretzel shape, most people might not laugh out loud, but they're going to think, oh, that's funny, because people are not in a pretzel shape in real life. So it's kind of, you know.
That's why I'm bad with pop culture jokes, because I don't keep up. So I'm just like, who are they referencing? And I'm bad with names. So I'm always like, who?
Yeah, I think it's like clarity. I would say this, 100% clarity. Make it so clear that and sometimes if you're lucky, if you have like a partner, a friend, your mom, or whoever that's around that you're like, please, hey, let me like pitch this to you. And because having an audience is just so invaluable, because then people will tell you right away if they don't get it. They're going to be, I don't get it. And then you're like, why don't you get it? And then they're going to say a thing. Listen to why they don't get it, not always their way of solving the problem, but definitely why they don't get it.
The note behind the note.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Pearl, do you have advice for artists who are interested in pursuing a career as a storyboard artist?
Oh, advice. I would say do it. And also believe that it's a real career. I think when I was in high school, I didn't think any kind of career in animation was really real. I had the fortunate chance, and I bring this up all the time, but when I was in art class in high school, I had this classmate whose parents were both storyboard artists. And I got a chance to have like coffee and tea with them and talk with them. And it was just really cool to see like real people out here doing this job, having a kid, like having a life. So I think one of the things that I would say is that definitely work on your technical drawing skills, because contrary to sometimes popular belief, you do need to draw, learn how to draw for animation, and especially for storyboarding. And I would say, what else can I say? Advice. Yeah, I think building up a portfolio that is really specifically targeted at storyboarding is really important. I think a lot of times when graduates put together a portfolio, it's very diverse. And I think a lot of recruiters look at it and go, well, what do you do? So I think it's really important to kind of put stuff on your website that's very much like, okay, I do storyboards, here are some shots, here's an animatic I put together. Yeah, you could put your life drawing, yeah, you could put your character designs or whatever, but make sure that your storyboard stuff is like at the forefront. And also being able to tell like a self-contained story, even if it's just like in one scene. I think that's really important too. So those kinds of things, if you can start kind of like training for early on, I think would be a really great way to become a storyboard artist or storyboard revisionist at first and work your way up, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also really important to have opportunities to see that people who are storyboard artists or directors are people who have jobs, and it's a career. Because I think a lot of people tend to, like, if you're in the audience, tend to assume, like, well, I can't do that, or I could never get to that job. But someone did. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind. Tom, do you have advice for artists who are interested in pursuing a career as storyboard artists?
Yeah, I would say I would love to see like a portfolio that kind of samples, gives a range of what they can do. Like obviously the regular storyboard for, you know, a nice storyboard that reflects the movie you're trying to get on. Like if you're trying to get into Pixar, obviously do a nice sequence, whatever your strength is. If it's character and comedy, do a little scene with the characters in your own voice, you know, I mean, in the voice of the characters, but with your own, you know, your own little storyline, little scene. I like what Pearl said about, show a piece of yourself, like a little project, of course, your own little story. That's cool. Everyone does that as a story artist. But I think I would do one more. I'm not sure exactly what that sample would be. I love seeing stuff like out of the box stuff, like someone takes a script page from Pulp Fiction and replaces the characters with lizards. You know, it's so fun because it's very familiar. Everyone knows the classic scene from Seven with the head or whatever, but do it with your spin, your style, your comedy, your whatever characters. But you know what I mean? So it doesn't come out of left field. It's so easy to look at someone's story and you're like, oh my God, what is this? And it's deep and it's personal. But get some samples that people can pick up right away. Like, oh, I get it. That's familiar, but it's kind of new, and get that varied range of samples to show us, because you're up against people who can do the job. Everyone can kind of, like, not everyone, but a lot of candidates are very competent at doing the job. And you're like, oh man, you're making my decision making process so hard. Make it easy for that person to be like, oh my God, you not only delivered what you should give us, what you should show us if you want a job at Pixar or wherever. They went above and beyond and did this Pulp Fiction scene. They did this little, so it doesn't hurt to have more than what you should have in the book or on your reel.
So like John Wick, but everybody's a Muppet.
Exactly. I love that. I'll get on that, Mike. Wait,
and,
I did a drawing of Mike. Look, it kind of looks like him. Come on, guys.
It kind of does look like me.
Yeah.
Give me a line. There's no eyes. He has no eyes and no soul. I'm kidding, Mike. I love it.
V, do you have advice for artists who are interested in pursuing a career as a storyboard artist?
I think what Tom said about like the Pulp Fiction thing is it's really great because I do feel like creating a sample in boards when you have no script is really hard because you're doing so much, you're writing and everything. So if you want to get something out quick, find these scripts online. It's so easy to find scripts online now. You literally just Google it. And I think just draw all the time. Like if you have, because here's the thing, like when you're a storyboard artist and it's your day job, you're going to be drawing close to 8 hours a day. So getting in that habit of just drawing a ton, so you're very comfortable with drawing. And because when you're going to be storyboarding, sometimes, like, you know, you tried a thing and turns out showrunner is not a big fan. So all like one sequence goes in, you know, like has to be redone. You have to reboard everything. So you have to be really, really fast at drawing and for your drawings to be very clear. So I would definitely try to go for like clarity more than very polished drawings. I tend to see portfolios with very clean, very detailed toned boards. It's great to have toned boards if you want to try for feature, but you want to tone them in the way that it looks like you toned it fast. Just because you want to be able to take a note from your directors. If your director's like, we got to reboard this, that, you know, it doesn't hurt as much because, you know, you can just redo it. Drawing a ton. That would be just draw all the time. And then, so your drawing becomes just more of a tool. It's kind of how I imagine it is like, you want your hand to be a printer for your brain. It's kind of my 2 cents.
No, that's a good tip. Like to see boards that aren't over labored. It's easy. Like if you're going to give a portfolio to a big DreamWorks, you want to polish and highlight. And it's like, you know, story art is not really polish and highlights. It's about just producing and getting it out there. So that's a good idea.
I think it's also something to say too, like if you know the style, if you've seen boards from that show before, to try to match that kind of style of finish or style in general. Because I think that certain TV, like productions for Craig of the Creek, like we have a cleanup phase and we have to clean it up because we send stuff overseas, right? But for feature, sometimes it's like, oh, you barely need a face. Like that's what they want to see because they want to see that you're fast and that you have gestural drawings and stuff like that. So I think that's also targeting who you're applying to and like reflecting that in your art.
Yeah. Know your
But
audience.
even on board driven shows, like the first pitch is so fast. Like you have so little time to just like write it all out and just draw it. So, you know, like even then you need to be fast.
Yeah, because I was going to add to that. I'll see portfolios where I think the problem is they're trying to be so polished and hyper clean that the posing and acting is so stiff.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they're just trying to be so like, they're trying to treat every panel like an illustration. It's like, dude, you don't have time for that. Like you need to get sometimes the life and energy comes from the sketches themselves. Yeah. So it being rough and sketchy has that energy. Whereas like, it's like, I get so many where it's like, dude, this is like really clean. I feel like you're just like moving the limbs. It's like it loses that life to it.
Unless you're applying for more, just a little caveat, like prime time, yes. But I do agree. I feel like I do want to see like very pushed acting because then I'm like, it's always easier to reel it back in than to push it. I think so. Yeah. I would trust someone who's like really over the top acting and something that's more prime timey because then I'm just like just pull it, like tame it, push it down, like but if someone's like really stiff and I want like, no, make it like loud and boisterous and crazy, it's gonna be more work.
Here, I got a quick funny aside story. Mike, do we have time?
Yeah, shoot.
So like what Nick and V was saying about energy, I remember we were at Blue Sky Studios and interviewing story candidates all week long. You know, and this guy comes in, Mike Daly, you know, he's kind of well known now in the space, but he was just the new dude. He just wanted a job at Blue Sky. And his drawings were very good, very awesome, great. He was showing us. This is in person, so this is kind of a tip if you do get to the point where you're in person. It's like, don't be afraid to kind of be out of the box if you're in person, because I remember he was showing us his portfolio, flipping through it, and he could tell we were like, oh, this is nice. And he gets down on the ground with his book, and he's like, no, I've got more. And he starts spreading out all these figure drawings on the ground. He's telling us about each one. He was so enthusiastic, you know. I'm like, why is this guy sweating so much? I don't get it. No, but he was like, you could tell like he had so much energy. It was in his drawings, and it's in the dude. So, I mean, he was perfect fit. But it doesn't hurt to just, again, kind of be that outlier. Be someone a little different. And make, you know, put it in your work if you can. And if you're there in person, it doesn't hurt to show a little flair in person.
Yeah, it's all about that voice.
Nick, I know that you have a lot of advice for artists who are aspiring to take on a storyboard artist role. Do you have any just quick thoughts about the types of skills that you need to cultivate for the job?
Yeah, I mean, most of the panelists have already said it, but yeah, you definitely need to know how to draw. And then like I said, like not being too tense, and I tell people this too. I was actually that guy, that would redraw everything. So I guess real quick, it's a digital platform now. Reuse what you can. I was definitely that guy, like, I'm going to redraw every panel. And I had no life for like months. So definitely take advantage that it's digital now. I know, sometimes people will thumbnail, traditionally, but even that, just be loose. Like, when I first got into storyboarding, I was thumbing in Photoshop and spending way too much time. My director was like, dude, you realize you've drawn the same thing like 3 times because you're doing it in Photoshop, then bring it into, you know, we were storyboarding in Flash. I know that's, everyone is like, what? But for Teen Titans Go was in Flash. So I was like drawing in Photoshop, drawing it again in Flash, and then cleaning it again for Clean Pass. So 3 times the same drawing. And I was just like, he's like, dude, just be loose, and like if you need to do it on Post-it, something looser, and then just draw it digitally. So definitely take advantage of the medium we use now, which is, you know, digital. And then just like we were saying before, don't be so tense. Like, just, it's more about like getting the thought out. It's kind of like when you're typing up a first draft and you're just like, just type everything and then go back and fix it later. It's the same with boards. It's like, you got this idea, just like draw it quick, go through it.
The vomit draft.
Yeah, exactly. Like, like that's how you draw. You're just like, it'll be funny, I swear.
Get it out, get it up on wheels, see if it works, you know?
Exactly. And if not, then you're like, you didn't spend much time on it. So having to start over, it's not a big deal. But if you're like, that's another thing too, have a thick skin, like take critiques well. I feel like some people like get really offended when you give them notes. I've had that happen where like you give it feedback of like what can make it funnier, what can make it better, or like even technical things like this isn't hooking up to this shot, and they'll be like, they like fall apart, and I'm like, no, I'm trying to help you. It's okay, it's okay. Like I made these mistakes too. Like I had jump shots at the yin yang because every show I work on, their heads are huge. So like I was doing jump shots like all the time. But it's just like, like definitely be able to take critiques and like listen to what people are saying because they're trying to help you. So don't see it as like, oh, how dare you? Like I'm the best, but like, you know, take it in and see like, cause like just real quick, another thing too, when you're boarding your own stuff, you get in your own mindset that everything makes sense. But you have to remember someone else is seeing it. So, like, if they're like, wait, why are they over here now? It's like, oh, well, in my brain that made sense, but it actually doesn't. So, just have a thick skin and be able to take critiques and keep drawing, I guess are my big ones.
All right, so we are almost out of time. Why don't we go through and talk about where people can find each of your work online? Tom, where can people find your work as a storyboard artist?
Yeah, tomlabath.com. And please come over and check out my YouTube channel. It's new. I have I don't have much of an audience, but it's a really fun channel. We critique art, so come on by.
All right. Pearl, where can people find your work online?
Yeah, you can go to pearllow.com, PEARLLOW.com. Most of my social media is linked there. My portfolio work is also up there, so you can choose what you would like to see.
And V, where can our viewers find more of your stuff?
You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram. I have a website. My name is pretty long, but you can find me easier through Creative Block Podcast. If you just Google Creative Block Podcast, me and my co-host Jean interview people in animation. We've had showrunners come on the show and talk about what it's like to be a showrunner.
No,
so check
That's
it
cool.
out.
What is it? It's called, what's called?
Creative
Block?
Creative Block, yeah. Type in Creative Block Podcast to really get it, because if it's just Creative Block, there's a million Creative Blocks.
I'm a big podcaster. I love listening to podcasts.
Yeah, I watch a few every now and then.
Cool.
I'm subscribed.
Wow.
And Nick, are you on any podcasts that Tom should be following?
No, actually, am I? I mean, besides this one, no. I mean, I just stream for people. I stream every now and then and do Twitch and stuff. But lately, if people have asked me to do a stream, that's where I am usually. But if you want to find all my social media, because I couldn't get all my names to be at Nick Paris, it's just Linktree/Nick Paris, and I actually put it in chat too. But Linktree spelled weird. It's like linktr.ee and then slash Nick Paris. But I finally just decided to put everything on one page. And then I guess the biggest thing there, if you go to my Gumroad, I actually have like a beginner's guide to storyboarding. And that's actually where my social media's blew up, was from that. Because everyone was like, oh my God, I made a free book. And I just made it. Real quick tip, make it choose your own price, and you'd be surprised what people pay. It's interesting. But if I would have set a price, I don't think I would have made as much as I did. It's weird, but...
What is it, a book or a course or what?
I compiled a bunch of like storyboarding notes and put it in what they call an ebook. So it's just a PDF. Yeah. It's literally just a PDF. But yeah, it's on my Gumroad. But you can find that on my Linktree. Everything is labeled. It's all there.
Good deal.
So I want to thank everybody who joined us for today's panel discussion. For students watching this discussion, if your animation program doesn't already provide licenses, you can learn about student licenses for Harmony and Storyboard Pro at toonboom.com/students. The discounts are great. You should really take advantage of them. And if you enjoyed this discussion about the industry and craft of animation, you might be interested in following us on Twitch and subscribing to our YouTube channel. We regularly host interviews, art streams, improv storyboarding sessions on our live streams, and you won't want to miss them. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.